When I first saw this film from 1920 of an incident in my hometown of Dungarvan, I was intrigued and I wanted to know more. So, after lots of searching through newspaper archives, I was able to piece together the story and fill in a little of the background too. The Civil War was in full swing. The Irish Republicans were fighting a fierce guerrilla war against the might of the Empire. Ordinary people were hounded on a daily basis, curfews imposed, and people lived in fear of being arrested and imprisoned. By this time, the RIC had been supplemented by the notorious Black and Tans, and we all know the stories of what they did, with no accountability. So it's the 11th of November 1920, and tensions are high in Dungarvan, County Waterford. 3 weeks earlier, Terence McSweeney had died in Brixton Prison after 75 days on hunger strike. And 2 weeks earlier, 18-year-old Kevin Barry, a medical student, had been executed in Dublin. The terrible atrocities that were happening all over Ireland only served to bolster anti-English feeling, and there was a quiet but confident hope that we could still win this war. So the day before, a number of Sinn Féin members were brought to the barracks, many forcibly, and were told to ensure that all businesses were closed the next day as a mark of respect for Armistice Day. Well, the following morning, it was noticed that the Union Jack had been removed and replaced with a tricolour flying over the ruin of Abbeyside Castle just across the river from the army barracks. And it was clear from a quick stroll around the town that many businesses had no intention of obeying the instructions to close shop. A group of soldiers emerged from the castle fully armed and their commanding officer carrying a pistol. They went through the town, ordering every shop and public house to close for the day. And then they crossed over to the square, to the shop of Dan Fraher, a prominent Gaelic leaguer. And there they dragged two young men named Graney and Fraher at bayonet point into the square. The boys were then marched over the bridge to Abbeyside to remove the flag from the castle, but when they got there, they refused, and the soldiers had to go and take it down themselves. On returning to the barracks, the soldiers took a large Union Jack and headed again for the town. And that's where the film really starts. I suppose the title says it all. No one can insult our flag. The soldiers had been humiliated at this point and were determined to make their point. So they marched into town again, pulled an onlooker from the side of the street and broke into a house and dragged out Roger Kiley at gunpoint to join them. The two men were then ordered to take hold of the Union Jack and march. But the men defiantly refused to even touch the flag, so the soldiers pinned it onto their jackets, and with bayonets raised at front and behind, the men were ordered to march to the square. You can see Kiley and Keown and how they're standing defiantly, with their hands hanging, refusing even to touch the flag that's been pinned on their jackets. At this point, the soldiers were joined by 4 lorries of Black and Tans for extra support, and the fully assembled crowd marched a mile or so across the causeway to Abbeyside Castle. The 2 civilians were ordered to climb the castle and raise the Union Jack, but again they refused. So the soldiers had to climb and hoist the flag themselves. They then issued a strict warning that they had a machine gun trained on the castle and that anyone caught interfering with it would be shot dead. There's conflicting stories about what happened next, and one version saying that the men were badly beaten and left on the side of the road as the soldiers marched back to the barracks. Later on, the soldiers returned and removed the Union Jack, fearing that when night set in, it might be taken by certain parties. And to finish the story, a year or so later, in March 1922, the Black and Tans, along with the soldiers and the RIC, were escorted from Dungarvan for the last time, after 750 years of occupation and oppression. The local IRA marched into the castle and took their place, and the first thing they did was to raise the tricolour, to mark a new beginning for Dungarvan and for Ireland.